I got this car addiction, and every once a year, every couple of years, I got to like.
Pawn Stars made Rick Harrison a household name. The man who turned a Las Vegas pawn shop into a global TV empire. But when the FBI showed up at his mansion, what they uncovered left even seasoned investigators stunned. Hidden rooms, mysterious documents, and secrets that raised more questions than answers. This isn't the Rick Harrison you thought you knew. Rick Harrison has always presented himself as the face of Pawn Stars. Witty, knowledgeable, and always ready with a one-liner about history or the value of an item. For millions of viewers, he became America's most trusted pawnbroker. But behind the polished TV persona, there have always been whispers, rumors about shady deals, legal disputes, and family conflicts that never made it to the History Channel. For years, those stories stayed in the background, until the day federal agents arrived at Rick Harrison's home. What they found didn't just shock the investigators, it sent ripples through the entire Pawn Stars empire. Before the FBI ever knocked on his door, Rick Harrison was already a self-made success. Born in 1965, he grew up in Las Vegas and worked side by side with his father, Richard "Old Man" Harrison, building the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop. By the time Pawn Stars premiered in 2009, Rick had crafted himself into a master storyteller. Each item brought into the shop was an opportunity not just to haggle, but to spin history into entertainment. The show became one of the History Channel's most watched series, turning Rick and his family into celebrities overnight. With fame came fortune. Rick's shop became a tourist hotspot, pulling in thousands of visitors daily. His personal wealth grew, and with it, so did the size of his lifestyle. He purchased luxury cars, real estate, and eventually, a sprawling mansion that became his sanctuary away from the cameras. But as Rick's empire grew, so did the scrutiny. Lawsuits, allegations of unpaid debts, and whispers of questionable business dealings began to swirl around him. Was the pawn empire as clean as it looked on television? Or was there something darker hiding beneath the surface? It started quietly. Neighbors of Rick's Las Vegas mansion reported seeing black SUVs pulling up late one evening, agents stepping out with serious faces. The FBI had arrived. According to those familiar with the raid, Rick wasn't prepared for what was coming. Agents presented a warrant and immediately began their search, moving from room to room in his lavish home. What were they looking for? The details are murky, but what's clear is that investigators uncovered more than they bargained for. Hidden safes, locked drawers, and entire rooms filled with items that had never been seen on Pawn Stars. Some were rare historical artifacts, others, the kind of items that raised legal and ethical red flags. Neighbors described the scene as surreal. The FBI carting out boxes late into the night, while Rick himself looked on in disbelief. The question was no longer whether Rick Harrison had secrets. The question was, what exactly had the FBI just found? As the FBI combed through Rick Harrison's sprawling mansion, they began uncovering items that raised eyebrows immediately. On the surface, it looked like a collector's paradise. Antique firearms, gold coins, Civil War relics, and even a collection of rare documents that belonged in museums rather than a private home. But the deeper agents dug, the more troubling the discoveries became. Some artifacts appeared to have questionable origins, with missing documentation and gaps in ownership history. In the pawn world, provenance, the paper trail that proves an item's legitimacy, is everything. Without it, even the most dazzling treasure can be considered stolen property. One investigator reportedly described the hidden room as looking less like a private collection and more like an evidence locker. There were safes stacked with old currency, military memorabilia with no clear source, and rumors of even rarer finds. Confidential letters, war medals, and items tied to famous political figures. For Rick, these discoveries painted a troubling picture. On Pawn Stars, he was always the voice of reason, insisting on authenticity before making a deal. But here, inside his own home, were items with no paper trail at all. The FBI wasn't just concerned with the artifacts themselves. They wanted to know how Rick had acquired them. Were they legitimate purchases, gifts, or had some passed through the gold and silver pawn shop under circumstances that wouldn't hold up under scrutiny? This revelation led many to wonder, was Rick Harrison simply a passionate collector, or had his success as a pawnbroker blurred the line between business and something much riskier? While the hidden treasures alone were enough to spark controversy, the timing of the FBI raid couldn't have been worse for Rick Harrison. Behind the scenes, his family was already tearing itself apart. In 2018, Rick's father, Richard "Old Man" Harrison, passed away. Fans of the show mourned the gruff but lovable patriarch, but inside the family, tensions exploded over his estate. When the will was revealed, it showed that one of Rick's brothers had been cut out entirely. Lawsuits followed, with accusations of manipulation and financial mismanagement swirling around Rick. Then came Rick's personal life. In 2020, his third wife filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The separation was messy, with disputes over assets and accusations that Rick had been hiding wealth. And as if that weren't enough, one of his sons also made headlines for his own legal troubles, dragging Rick's name into unwanted media coverage yet again. The FBI raid didn't happen in isolation. It happened against the backdrop of a family empire in crisis. To outsiders, it suddenly looked like the Harrisons weren't the lovable Las Vegas family portrayed on TV, but a dynasty riddled with betrayal, lawsuits, and secrets. Some began asking, was the FBI's interest in Rick purely about artifacts? Or had the ongoing family drama raised suspicions that there was more to the story than anyone realized? The raid on Rick Harrison's mansion didn't just put his personal life under scrutiny. It cast a long shadow over Pawn Stars itself. For over a decade, the show had been a cultural phenomenon, drawing millions of viewers each week. The gold and silver pawn shop became a must-visit Las Vegas attraction, where tourists lined up outside just to step into the world they'd seen on TV. But when the FBI carried boxes out of Rick's home, fans started asking uncomfortable questions. If these kinds of questionable treasures were sitting in his mansion, what about the shop? Had items featured on the show been acquired through similar means? Had Rick's charming explanations about authenticity and history masked a darker reality? Industry insiders noted that the pawn world, while entertaining on television, has always operated in a legal gray zone. Not every item comes with clean paperwork, and sometimes dealers look the other way when the price is right. For Rick, the optics were terrible. Here was the man who built his brand on knowledge and credibility, now facing suspicions that his empire might not be as clean as it appeared. The History Channel also faced tough choices. While they remained silent publicly, behind the scenes there was concern about whether the scandal could damage the show's reputation. Pawn Stars wasn't just a TV show, it was a global franchise, with reruns and spin-offs generating millions. If Rick's name was tainted, the entire brand risked collapsing. And so the question became, could the gold and silver pawn shop survive the storm? Or was this the beginning of the end for the empire the Harrisons had built? The public's response to the FBI raid was immediate and divided. Longtime fans of Pawn Stars rushed to Rick's defense, insisting that he was being unfairly targeted. They pointed to his years of entertaining millions, his philanthropy in Las Vegas, and his reputation as a businessman who put his city on the map. To them, Rick was the victim of government overreach, a man punished simply for being successful. But critics saw things differently. For them, the raid confirmed suspicions that had lingered for years. Rumors of shady deals, family lawsuits, and wealth that seemed to grow faster than the shop's modest size could explain suddenly looked more plausible. Social media exploded with speculation, memes, and heated debates about whether Rick Harrison was a hero or a fraud. Local Las Vegas residents also weighed in. Many who had visited the shop spoke of long lines and high prices, claiming the pawn business had become more of a tourist attraction than a legitimate enterprise. Others whispered that Rick's connections and growing fortune couldn't all be explained by what viewers saw on TV. For Rick, the fallout was personal as well as professional. Friends described him as shaken, angry, and determined to clear his name. But the damage was already done. Once the FBI walks through your front door, the public's trust is almost impossible to fully regain. So the real question became, could Rick Harrison ever restore his image? Or was his legacy permanently tarnished? The FBI raid revealed more than just questionable artifacts. As agents moved deeper into Rick Harrison's mansion, they discovered elements that painted a much more complicated portrait of the reality star. Hidden rooms were tucked away behind false walls, spaces that seemed designed less for comfort and more for secrecy. In one such room, agents found safes stacked one on top of another, each containing collections of rare coins, bars of silver, and watches worth small fortunes. For any collector, this would seem impressive. But for investigators, the lack of documentation was deeply concerning. Perhaps most shocking was the discovery of personal journals, letters, and transaction notes detailing deals that never made it into the public spotlight. These documents hinted at a network of private sales, high-value items exchanged away from the pawn shop, and the cameras of pawn stars. For federal investigators, this raised alarms about potential tax evasion, smuggling, or worse. Neighbors, and even some former employees, whispered that they weren't surprised. Rick always had a way of keeping his real business separate from the TV show, one insider allegedly said. What you saw on Pawn Stars was just the tip of the iceberg. The more the FBI uncovered, the more it seemed like Rick Harrison's mansion wasn't just a home. It was a vault of secrets. So the question became, were these hidden treasures the spoils of legitimate business deals or evidence of something Rick had spent years keeping under wraps? As news of the raid spread, Rick Harrison found himself backed into a corner. The public was divided, his family fractured, and his show's future uncertain. But Rick was never one to walk away from a fight. He doubled down on public appearances, insisting that he had nothing to hide. To his supporters, he painted himself as a victim of sensationalism and government intrusion. He spoke about his years of hard work, about building his pawn empire from scratch, and about how easy it was for outsiders to misunderstand the complexities of the pawn industry. But privately, Rick knew his reputation was on the line. For a man whose brand was built on credibility, the expert who could spot a fake from a mile away, even the suggestion that his collection included questionable items was devastating. Every article, every late-night joke, every whisper of scandal chipped away at the image he had carefully constructed over decades. Rick's fight wasn't just about protecting his wealth, it was about salvaging his legacy. Would the world remember him as the charismatic face of Pawn Stars, the man who turned a small Vegas pawn shop into a global empire? Or would he be remembered as another celebrity who flew too close to the sun, undone by secrets he couldn't keep buried? As the FBI continued its investigation, Rick Harrison faced the fight of his life. Not in a courtroom, not in his shop, but in the court of public opinion. And that leaves us with one haunting question. Can Rick Harrison ever escape the shadow of what was found in his mansion? Rick Harrison built his empire on trust. The trust that when you walked into his shop, you'd get honesty, expertise, and maybe even a piece of history. But when the FBI walked out of his mansion, with boxes of hidden treasures. That trust was shaken to its core. Whether Rick is guilty of wrongdoing or simply a man caught in the storm of his own success, one thing is clear: the discoveries inside his home will forever shadow his legacy. The charming pawnbroker who made history entertaining is now the subject of a mystery that even Pawn Stars can't put a price on. The tragedy of Rick Harrison is not just about what the FBI found. It's about how quickly fame can turn to suspicion, and how fragile an empire can be when built on secrets. But now, the question is yours. Do you believe Rick Harrison was simply a passionate collector who got tangled in red tape? Or was he hiding a side of himself the cameras were never meant to see? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories about the stars you thought you knew, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.